and we are recording, and we're delighted to have with us Heather Sultz, who is among the early pioneers with Crossroads, and had, I think, really unique experiences there. And I want to start off, Heather, not directly with you, but with the pipeline coming to Crossroads from the college school. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk a little bit about that? And yeah, you make it personal, but also why it seemed like a natural transition from the college school to Crossroads.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I went to the college school in Webster Groves, my whole grade school, first through sixth grade. And, I mean, personally, I don't remember, like, I wasn't in on, finding Crossroads
Mhm.
at that point in my life, but my parents, who both taught at Webster University, were very, happy to have both my sister and I in experiential education. And I think originally we went to the college school because my birthday was right after the cutoff. My birthday
Mhm.
was in October, right after the cutoff, with when I would have had to wait a year to go to first grade. And they knew that I was fine and ready to go to first grade. So I went to a private school instead of a public school. And they were teachers at Webster. So the college school, which is run by Webster College, was available to us. But, once we were in, I think they were looking for a good fit for us that would continue our experiential education and alternative so-called education, and not have to dump us into a public school system, which at the time for us, it was not a good fit or situation. And I know that quite a few of my classmates at college school were going to Crossroads. Rachel Rosen, I went to school,
Mhm.
college school with Rachel Rosen, and actually Catherine Park, and I think a bunch of other people who
There were some
now
others who came in the beginning.
later. Yeah.
Logan Martin,
Oh yeah, Logan Martin and Susan
Logan,
Martin. I went
Susan Martin, Paul
Susan
Patchett. Does that name ring a
Paul
bell?
Paget, because Margaret Paget, his sister, didn't go to Crossroads, but
Right.
college school together.
Todd Heritage,
Yep, Todd. Yep.
and there were others. Uh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. So there were a ton of us who, and some of those people, like Rachel, lived in the Central West End. So we lived near the college school in Webster Groves, but they, I guess, were already aware of Crossroads. And, I'm not sure how much that had to do with my parents' decision to like go there, but it was a great fit because we were already in an alternative learning system, and it just rolled right into that. It was really easy.
Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more about your parents, what they taught, and I remember them both being very unique. And so maybe if you can uh, tell everyone about that, I think that'd be really, really great.
Yeah, sure. So my dad, Phil Sultz, they both taught at Webster University. Well, it was Webster College, in the art department. My dad was a painter and my mom was a potter. And so they were both working active artists at the same time as being university teachers. And we lived right across the street from campus. I grew up on campus. I grew up as sort of a college kid my whole, childhood, and was around that educational setting the whole time. So, that I was always in a learning environment. And my parents, being artists and also teachers, we were always, our house and our lives were just full of learning experiences without being structured, sit down at a table and learn something. We were always doing something. There was always art going on in our house. There was always, we were always making something, making pots, drawing, from one on, we were just always creating stuff. And it was just what we did. It wasn't like a structured time. It wasn't like an activity that was scheduled. It was just the way we lived. And so they were really extremely influential for me. My dad passed in 2021, and my mom is here with us in Chicago, now has dementia, but
Mm.
we in the past few years we've been through a lot, and sort of the transition that they're making in their lives. But
And your
we,
sister Jenny is with you in Chicago too?
yeah, Jen lives here in Chicago, as do I. And so we're just, I think the both of us are really incredibly indebted to what they gave us.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. Well, let's move to the Crossroads years, okay? Um, and you had, a wonderful circle of friends,
Yeah.
um, and there were interesting activities. I mean, when you think about what you did at Crossroads, are there any particular either events, activities, classes that stand out to you?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, knowing that we were going to talk. So I remember Carol's Life on the Mississippi class, which
Hmm.
of course we read Life on the Mississippi, Mark Twain, but also did all these wonderful activities. I remember going down to the riverfront and doing this. I don't exactly remember the whole everything that we did that day, but one of the things was very clear. For some reason, I walked between Eads Bridge and the next bridge, which I can't remember what it is.
Might have been well, there's Veterans Bridge, and now MLK Bridge.
Yeah, right. And so I counted my steps from one bridge to the other bridge on the cobblestones.
Hmm.
And I think we were trying to measure distance, is what I think we were doing. But I remember counting my steps between bridges. And like, I just loved, being from the college school environment, we always were doing outdoor education, and,
Right.
we had a big, very heavy into that. And so I just loved all the field trips and outdoor experiences that we had in the city. I remember going, I think at Arthur, it was your class. It was a St. Louis kind of, was some kind of social studies class, I think, that you did, that was evolving the city and like the architecture buildings of downtown. And we spent a night on the top of a skyscraper.
Yeah,
You're
we
down there.
did indeed.
Yeah.
There were the three mansion house buildings down
Yes,
just
that's right. Yeah.
north, yeah, of the bridges, and we were on top of one of the 30-story mansion house.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the weirdest thing was, I don't know if you remember this, but Carol had her like $700 camera stolen,
Wow. No, I don't
which,
remember
yeah, which was really weird. I
that.
mean, how did somebody get there?
Right.
And I think you remember Alan Duffy, right?
Yes.
And his dad, Bob Duffy, who wrote
Yeah.
for the Post-Dispatch, was with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
It was an interesting article for him about, was it Spider-Man? How did that camera disappear? But I want to
Right.
ask you something else about with Life on the Mississippi.
Yeah.
Were you ever in any of Carol's classes that went to Campsville, Illinois? It was an archaeological site run by Northwestern University.
Um,
It was if you remember where Alton, Illinois is,
yeah.
it was a little bit north of there.
Okay.
And it may have been after
Yeah, I
our
don't
time,
remember.
but it was, Carol arranged with Northwestern for students to come and dig. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I remember going with Carol on, we all went, I don't remember what class it was, but we all went on a camp out at there's a there's a park up near Alton.
Yeah, Pure Marquette.
Or Marquette, yeah. And we were camping and it started to rain and so this was the first time, we were all supposed to go shopping for our own dinners that we could cook. And I think it was probably the first time that I ever had like bought stuff for myself that wasn't including the family, you know?
Yeah.
And so like we all went to the store and bought, most people, which I didn't, but most people bought steaks. Like little
Yeah.
individual steaks. When they got to go to the store, they bought steak. I think I bought hamburger. Anyway, we went to this to Pere Marquette and we were camping out like, I don't know, we may have had tents, but it started to rain. So we were all sleeping on the picnic tables underneath this picnic shelter.
Yep. Yeah.
But no one could sleep and it was like really rainy and heat lightning. So we all got up in the middle of the night and hiked up a trail in the, I think it was probably a full moon. So we all hiked in the middle of the night somewhere and then came back and it had stopped raining and it
Oh
was
my God.
really memorable. Yeah.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And so many of you at that point, you were pioneers for Crossroads, but that was almost like a recreation of a pioneer activity too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
was
I think we had the feeling that, I mean, I think I had that feeling that we were part of something that was not brand new, but that was kind of a work in progress and kind of like this was exciting because it was we were all figuring this out together in some ways. You know, the very first time we met and that I had anything to do with Crossroads, I think I came down to the previous site to do my interview down
in Laclede Town,
Town.
right?
But then when I was going to go to school and everything, the first thing we did when we came to the Lindell building, I helped paint. We helped paint
Yep.
that summer before I went to school there. So we helped paint the building. So it was like
And you probably remember Andy from then.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that may have been when you met Jim Abbott, who
yeah.
became, yeah.
Actually, I think he was a year after me. I think he
Yeah,
wasn't
actually,
there.
yeah.
He
Yeah,
wasn't there my first year. And we are dear friends to this day. Yeah.
right.
I have
Right.
lots of good friends still. Yeah.
That is so great. So what do you remember most about the Lindell building?
Whenever I think about the Lindell building, I think of the different colored rooms. And
Mhm.
and that's what we called them, like the green room, the blue room. I was trying to explain this to somebody recently. Like, I think the meeting room was the blue room. No, the blue room was where we
I'm in
ate.
the brown room on the first
Yeah,
floor.
on the
Yeah.
first floor.
We didn't really
And
have chairs. We had
no,
those.
yeah, we had
Yeah.
we had pillows um,
Yeah.
and it's like when I think about it, I just think like that's normal to me. But when you try to explain it to someone, they're like, wait, what? And so but yeah, I remember the different colored rooms and that's what, oh, everybody go to the green room, we knew where to go. I remember Alan Duffy and Jim Igo, who actually I found on Facebook. I don't know. Nobody knows where Alan Duffy is, which is like, I don't know how to find him. But the two of them used to do the announcements at lunch or I think it was at lunch or in the start of the day. And they always used to do jokes and like really bad jokes that they got out of some book, and I remember those meeting times where we all got together and had check-ins with each other. I mean,
Those were definitely fun. And I owe it all to you being able to track down Jim Igo. And
yeah,
then I had no idea that he's head of the anthropology department at
I
University of
know,
Virginia.
I
And
know.
he was a great interview.
Oh,
So
good.
whoops. I'm gonna we were talking about Jim Igo and on anybody who's watching this interview, having come through the Crossroads History website, you got an easy link to Jim.
Great.
Um, yeah, one of the things that when I look back on those days, that it's a to some people it's a minor thing, others it was really important, and that was middle school students having off-campus permission at lunch.
Yeah, yeah, yep. And
Were there any places you would go, or did you mainly eat it in the building?
well, I think I mainly ate in the building because I feel like I probably took my lunch from home a lot.
Hmm.
But and I think that maybe um like I'm probably like the first year, like seventh grade, I was probably on campus, but then, as my parents got used to the idea, maybe like I don't remember actually going. I remember Susan Martin every day she went to the candy store and ate and got just tons of candy. She just ate candy all the time and she was just this big,
Yeah.
And but
And
I but
Catherine, on the other hand, always went to Garavelli's,
yes,
and she got
well,
me a roast beef sandwich and
yeah.
chocolate cream pie, which I loved. Yeah.
Yes. And I remember probably once a week, maybe there would be like a time when you could order from somewhere, like we would go
Yeah.
to McDonald's or Garavelli's or somewhere. And
Yeah.
I remember occasionally being able to do that, like, because I didn't have money or we didn't, but at sometimes it was okay and I could like go and get something to eat that wasn't at my tuna fish sandwich. So I remember that chocolate cream pie. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So we had 75 students and maybe 5 or 8 teachers in what had initially been built as a home. Did you feel cramped in there?
I don't remember feeling cramped at all. I mean, it's funny because yeah, it was a beautiful home. I've actually been back when my partner Jeff and I went to St. Louis right before COVID, and we were staying in the Central West End. Actually, we were staying in the building that where Garavelli's was. It's now
Ah,
Holiday Inn or something.
yeah.
And I said we got to go down the street, and he took a picture of me in front of
Oh,
Crossroads. And but I don't, and so I think I thought of it as like, oh, this is some place that used to be someone's home, obviously, but I don't remember feeling cramped or it was always like bustling with activity. And uh yeah, I think it felt like the right amount of people for the space to me.
I think
Yeah,
it was, but we wanted to expand to a high school,
right.
and
Yeah,
that meant bigger space, and that's what took us to Bolivar.
yeah,
But unfortunately, your runway ran out for Crossroads before high school.
yeah, you 1
So
year.
tell us about your high school and college.
So, yeah, I graduated ninth grade the year before you guys moved.
Hmm.
So so I had to go somewhere. And I was already like, so I went seventh, eighth, and ninth because that's what
Hmm.
Crossroads did. And then, so ninth is technically freshman year of a high school.
Right.
And so when I had to find someplace, I was going in as a sophomore, sort of, behind everybody else that would be there. And I, uh, as many things in my life, I had no idea at the time what to do or what direction to go. Just kind of went with what happened. But I remember uh, auditioned is not the word. I'm a performer, so it's not the word. What do you call it when you apply? I applied
Okay.
for John Burroughs. And
Okay.
so at the time, as you probably remember, I was heavily into dance class, and I by the time I was in ninth grade, I was dancing every afternoon after school. I was going to dance class in Clayton, at a very rigorous ballet school. So when I went to John Burroughs, they accepted me, and which at the time I maybe didn't realize, but that was a big deal. And because it was a prestigious school, hard school to get into.
Yeah.
And I went for my interview, and I met someone from the college school, my best friend from second grade. She was there, and she was this girl from East St. Louis ended up at John Burroughs, and we met in the hallway at John Burroughs, and I was like, hi, Carla. And she, so it was really weird. And then I went for this interview, and they explained to me that I had to be part of their athletics after school. That was a requirement to be at John Burroughs. You had to be part of athletics. It was after school. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm a dancer. I have to take dance class. And they wouldn't allow dance class to count as their athletic. So I didn't go to John Burroughs, which quite frankly, I think it was a blessing. I went to Narenx Hall, which was right down the street from where I lived in Webster Groves. It was run by the same nuns that formerly had run the Webster College. Was separated by that point, but a Catholic, girls' school, which I did not love, but it was very easy. I could walk to school, and I could dance every day after school. And that was what I cared about. And it was a good education. It's a good school, but it was, having come from Crossroads, I had kind of done everything that we were doing in sophomore year. I was repeating a lot because Crossroads was really advanced and rigorous. And I always felt like Narenx was like, I could kind of just ease up on having to work so hard at school, and then I could concentrate on like the dance part of my life. So I found Narenx much easier than Crossroads. And even though Narenx is considered a really good school and it's like a good education, and so I did that for 3 years, and then I went to Webster College, well, Webster University by that point. And because I was in dance, and my parents were still teaching there, and they have an excellent theater and dance program. And it was kind of like, well, obviously I'm going to, apply to the dance program. And it's also right across the street from my house. So I went to Webster University in the dance, a really great, also challenging, but great experience there. Always insisting, I was probably the only theater and dance major who was always insisting on taking other classes outside of my field, because I was always wanting to take history classes. And they had these wonderful civilizations classes, and it was reminiscent of Crossroads and even the college school, of like continuing your rounded education and not just concentrating in your field, even though your field is really a specialized thing. So I did that. And then I went right on to grad school at Ohio State and got a master's in dance, in choreography. And then we went out into the world. But, I would say that it was a somewhat hard transition from the college school and Crossroads into Narenx. That was the hardest transition, because it was more of a straight ahead, desks and, more formalized environment. We didn't really go on campouts that much. But it was actually a time where I was doing other things. So I wasn't really that concerned with what that environment was like.
Oh, just a couple of observations. It's a wonderful story. I'm going to have to check with Burroughs and see if you applied now, if they would have the same restrictions. I'm curious whether or not they've changed, and I don't know. I can see it working out either way.
Yeah.
Two is, I find it so refreshing that you say you went to grad school at Ohio State instead of the Ohio State.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I just think that's ridiculous. I don't know how that started or why people do that, but I don't do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and you've had a remarkable life since college. And being able to fulfill your own needs quite a bit, but providing so much for so many others. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Well, after grad school, I bounced around. I've lived in a lot of places, kind of searching for what I wanted to. I kind of didn't want to go to New York. I,
Hmm.
later on, I kind of had that more, but initially, I was sort of like, I don't know. So I moved to Chicago, and I lived in Chicago for a few years and danced a lot with some independent choreographers and worked for the Clinton campaign. The very first Clinton campaign was there. I was there. I was an advance, and I was on the advance teams when he came to town and when Hillary came to town. So
Wow.
I met
Okay.
them early on, and it was one of the I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and it was really a formative experience. I very, very nearly tried to go to Washington after he was elected and work.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a serious consideration, but it didn't work out.
Let me just, before
Yeah.
you go any further, because I find it really interesting. And um, you remember, I think, Kim Sawyer, who taught,
Yep. Yep.
right, and her husband John, who was on the editorial board of the Post Dispatch, and then became Washington bureau chief.
Hmm.
And during that election, he always had reservations about Clinton and supported Paul Tsongas from
Oh yeah.
Massachusetts. And his concerns about Bill Clinton were, that in some ways he might be compromised. And, his
Yeah.
concerns seem to be somewhat well-founded.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I certainly understand, and I know we were feeling the same way. And I will never forget after that convention in '92, and they had a campaign bus, a Clinton Gore bus
uh-huh.
that came into downtown St. Louis, Keener Plaza, just tens of thousands of people.
Yep.
Really, really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I grew up in I'll address your concerns in a minute, but I grew up in the era of, Nixon.
Hmm.
And then, I mean, Carter was, while I was at Crossroads, we actually, that I remember that we had a class about Carter. That was one of the first classes I ever took with you, uh,
Yeah.
was a class about Carter. But, that was a brief moment. And then we were into, Reagan. And so, and like Bush. And so my whole childhood was like these Republican people who we did not support, and so Clinton was such a breath of fresh. It was the first time I felt like someone who cared about me was going to be there, and that he was a good guy. And yes, okay, so everybody knew, working on the campaign, I mean, everybody knew who he was. Everybody knew what he was like. I was a young woman at the time. I was in my 20s, and you go to I mean, he didn't care about me, but you'd go to a line, like you work on the advanced team getting events ready when they came to Chicago, which they came a lot because Illinois was a big one of their big pushes. And at the end of the night, you'd get in a line and shake everybody's hand, and he was always lovely. He was always very personal. He would look you in the eye and he would make a connect. He was so good at making connections with people, but I just felt like he and Al Gore were the first people that I could vote for the top of the ticket, that would really be people that would represent me, and like now, like Obama later on, and like now, it was such a breath of joy, to be able to support people that you really supported.
I have to put in a couple of things because I really appreciate what you're saying. I remember election night 1980, and that was at the new building, the first year at the new building. And we had fairly high expectations, and Reagan won overwhelmingly against Carter, disappointing a lot of people. A
Yep.
lot of Democratic Senate seats went down.
Yep.
That was a tough night.
Yeah.
Something else I'd want to just interject here because we're talking on what will become the fourth night of the Democratic National Convention in 2024. And I'm finding it interesting that from what I've heard, there's not been a single mention of either Jimmy Carter or Al Gore.
Yeah,
Two pretty remarkable people, and I hate to think, that they're forgotten.
yeah,
And it had me thinking even further about Bill Clinton, that his vice president was deprived of the presidency because
yes,
of the Electoral College,
yep.
and his wife was deprived for the same reason.
Hmm.
You know, top that somebody, having somebody whose vice president and
Yeah,
spouse, you know,
yeah.
were essentially cheated. And I'm going to use the word cheated advisedly because the system is so unfair.
Yeah, and
Um,
I watched Bill last night on the
yeah. Hmm.
convention, and he said, we have been in this place before. We have been too complacent, and he's
Hmm.
talking about Al. He's talking about Hillary. I mean, he has lived that, and we've all lived that. So
Right.
we can't give up. We can't think that this is going to be a stroll. It is not going to be a stroll, and But yeah, I mean, it's such a Actually, Carter's grandson, I think it was the first night, Carter's grandson, because, went up and said, I had read this article before that said that Jimmy Carter is holding on to vote for Kamala Harris
Oh,
because
that is
he's,
so good. I love that.
and that's what his grandson said that on the stage. He said, he's 99, he's going to be 100 right before the election.
October 1st, actually.
He's in, yeah, that's right. He's in hospice,
Right.
has brain cancer, and he's holding on. It's like,
So
yeah,
neat. So neat. Yep.
yeah.
Well, I've been told not to have these go much beyond a half hour, but I want to hear more about
Oh,
your artistic
right.
work.
We
Okay.
got off track. Yes. So,
Well, that's all right. I can never get too much following. Go ahead.
so anyway, so I was in Chicago for a few years, and then I really didn't click that much, and I had some things that drew me, friends and whatnot, drew me down to Austin, Texas, and I lived in Austin, Texas for 8 years. The music scene also, because I was very into, I mean, I had these dreams of singer-songwriterdom, but
Uh-huh.
never kind of materialized. But I went down to Austin and was surrounded by music anyway, and danced for companies there, and started to do my own work, started to teach in universities there. Um, kind of got to the end of what I wanted to do there, moved to Wyoming, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. After all of these moves have sort of like a little moment of pause in between them when I'm trying to figure out what the next step is. So it's not like immediately, but moved there. My parents had been park rangers before I was born out in Teton. And so I had a lot of connections out there, and I had been there many times. And there was a dance school and small company there. I contacted them. I went out and I worked for them, and also did my own work. While I was there, I started my kind of pickup company while I was living in Wyoming, Sultz Dance, and started making site specific, but also theater, but also site specific work for different places. Museum. There's a wildlife museum out there that I did a big piece for, uh, and then very hard to make a living in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, if you're not a billionaire, when you don't have to make a living, or if you're like a service worker, and the
Yeah.
in between, it's just really hard. So then I didn't know what I was going to do, and I kind of bounced. I came to Chicago, stayed with my sister for a few months, and then got an opportunity out of the blue to a friend of mine from grad school contacted me, and she knew of a job opening, a new dance department, which hardly ever happens, in a university that I had never heard of in New Jersey, there, that I never really wanted to go to, but I couldn't pass it up. And I went, and I had been applying for teaching job, university teaching jobs. We all, send out hundreds of resumes all the time, and something sticks and then it doesn't, or whatever. and I was doing workshops at different places, but this university in New Jersey, Georgian Court University, they were starting a dance department, and they were building a new building for it. And they hired me to create a dance department from scratch. So I knew I could do it, because not that I had, so I'd never been a full-time member of a department before. I'd always been an adjunct, but I knew I could do it. I knew I could do it because, of course,
Yeah, I mean,
you
you,
know.
you prepared your whole life for it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like I had the information in here.
Right.
And so, I went out to New Jersey, and it was in the middle of it's not near, it's right between New York City and Philadelphia. It's really Jersey Shore
Yeah.
and I, knew no one, but, and it was very much culture shock in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I created a dance department. I not only had to supervise the building of the studios, which were massive and wonderful, but kind of overkill. A lot of it was like the planning was planned by people who didn't quite exactly know what to do, and then they did it, and then I had to like jump in and be kind of like, oh, let's like refigure this a little so it actually works, But so overseeing a building,
Not easy. Yeah.
buying like pianos and supplies and whatever, and then recruiting for students, and with New York City and Philadelphia right pretty close. So who's going to come to this department in the middle of Jersey Shore? Got 10 majors the first year that it opened, which was an amazing accomplishment.
That is great. Yeah.
Yeah, but unfortunately my bosses,
Yeah.
didn't understand that 10 was a big number and not a small number. So I was always under the gun to do more when I was actually doing really well. And I kind of knew
Yeah.
that. So after a couple of years, I was there 2 years and started the department, got it on. First year was just completely, preparation. Second year was full speed ahead, opening the department, having classes, teaching over full-time because I was the only full-time faculty member. And then like getting it up on its feet, having performance opportunities for students, all that kind of stuff. And then but I quickly knew that I was either going to stay and be in New Jersey for a very long time, trying to get this thing to work, or I was not going to stay, and I was going to go pursue something that I had in the back of my mind for a while. And so I decided not to stay, and everyone was shocked. I gave up a full-time teaching job in a university
Yeah.
to move to LA and to act, basically, which I had been kind of mulling for a very long time. And so I gave everything up in New Jersey, moved to LA, and started figuring out how to make inroads into that world. And did a number of small projects, independent films. One of the films went to Sundance, which was a very cool experience. And just small things, nothing anyone has ever heard of, but stuff that was interesting to me, and was stuff that I could access. And then continued my choreography and formalized it into Keyhole Residencies, which is my company that does not only performances for site-specific places, but also workshops and longer residencies for kind of combining communities with environment. So I'll take a community of people, whether it be some people that work in a certain place or a museum that gets people in, or whatever the community may be, a school, with the environment that they either are in all the time, or maybe it's a new environment that they've never been in before, and using movement to explore community and environment. So that's the work I've been doing for about probably 15 years now, 10, 15 years, as well as doing performance pieces for mostly now for site-specific places. Moved to Chicago in 2017, I believe. It's a little murky.
Right.
But my partner got a job here, and so we moved back to Chicago. And so a big piece that the last big piece that I did was at the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C., in the former Armory in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, yeah.
It's an amazing site. And I had been working on getting into this site for probably 8 to 10 years, of contacting them and them not being ready. And all these residencies I do, they take a while to kind of get everybody interested and get on the roster. And so it finally happened in 2019, and it was a really amazing residency. They supported me very well. I auditioned a group of not dancers, people that wanted to be part of this project. And it was people of all kinds, scientists and teachers and some, theater people, but also like historians. And it was tons of different people. There were about 40 performers, and created a site work in the space for these people. We created it together, and was there in residence for about, I believe it was about 2.5 weeks. At the end of the 2.5 weeks, I taught classes during that time. At the end of the 2.5 weeks, we had performances. It was well received. It was great. And then COVID hit. So since COVID, things have been bumpy and rocky, and but more to come.
Right, right. Well, we're gonna have to wrap it up.
Okay.
But there's a closure of the circle now, because, with your keyhole work, it looks like you're going to be teaching a class at Crossroads on Friday, September 20th, as part of the 50th reunion.